So, howdy. Hi, everybody. I'm Tom Nguyen, and I am a nerd. And ever since I was a little kid, I'd spend hours playing with little plastic Lego bricks, building little galactic empires all across my parents' living room. I'd make up stories about heroes in blocky spaceships fighting evil aliens to save the day. And then my mom, concerned about her 13-year-old son, who was way too old to be playing with Legos, would walk in and remind me to put the toys away and go do my homework. So I'd struggle through a lot of homework and then work in the years to come. But then, somehow I ended up at this wonderful place. This is my depiction of Stanford Business School. So I studied under expert psychology and marketing professors, Al Gore's presentation coach, Pixar animators and storytellers, the folks that brought us this. And I actually found out that stories, those things I was playing with in my parents' living room, are maybe the most important part of people's work. Because they're actually our most powerful tool, not for blowing up aliens, but for persuading and influencing all the humans all around us. So now I'm a principal product manager at Adobe, just down on 7th and Townsend, not too far away from here at TechSoup, and we love TechSoup and share a lot of our tools here. What I do at Adobe is I created and lead a storytelling app called Adobe Voice. So Apple actually named it one of the best iPad apps of the year, which is really exciting. Some reviewers, David Pogue, who used to write for the New York Times, he's the editor for technology at Yahoo, described Voice as one of the simplest, most creative, most joyous apps ever written. And I'd never really thought about a tattoo, but if I ever get a tattoo, it may have a critic's review on it. But more importantly than that, at this point, so we launched it last year. It's a free app. It's on the iPad. You can just go to the App Store and just download it completely free. And it helps people make incredible video stories in minutes. And I'm not going to, since it doesn't work, I can show Voice later on in the Q&A and laterwards, but I won't do any pitches, and I'll stay focused on the main idea of storytelling across different medium. But if folks have questions about Voice, happy to answer them later. But the most exciting thing about Voice, though, is in the year that we've launched it, at this point, millions of people have downloaded it to make incredible video stories. They include amazing organizations. So the largest marriage equality group in Ireland back in the spring was using Voice to advocate for marriage equality, and they had a lot to celebrate last spring, which is pretty cool. All the way to the Secretary General's envoy at the United Nations, using Voice to talk about the trips he's taken in Cairo and Brussels and sharing the work that they're doing at the United Nations. All the way to sixth graders working to keep New York City's rivers clean and actually making beautiful explainer videos that succinctly tell the story of why clean waterfronts in New York really matter. And you're talking about a 6-year-old who's creating stories that nonprofits are using as their videos to tell their message. And so that's been really cool to see. In fact, if I'm ever down, I'll just spend some time on Twitter. I mentioned, in addition to business school, I studied education in graduate school before. So anytime I need to pick me up after a hard day, I just go on Twitter and search for Adobe Voice, and this is the stuff I'll see. So kids of all ages, building stories and sharing them online. It turns out adults don't really take selfies of themselves using iPad apps, so I can't show those photos, but kids and teachers have been super excited, hundreds and thousands of people, and that makes me pretty stoked. And it's the same kind of professional videos and stories that people in Hollywood use, but it's easy enough and accessible enough that anyone can tell them. But the most remarkable thing, I think, has been seeing how stories have helped create fantastic online communities. So there's this idea of stories as the mortar that really holds communities together. And this isn't a new thing. This isn't restricted to digital communities or digital storytelling. That's how it's always been. When we were cave folk sitting around the campfire, we were sharing stories about what happened to us, that saber-toothed cat that we just barely missed in the brush that we saw. It's why we still hear mythology from thousands of years ago from the Greeks that have been passed on, because these are how cultures pass on the lessons that are most important to them. It's how our grandparents shared what they learned and what they believe to another generation. Stories are how we share what matters most to us. So, I'm going to share some tips today about what I learned along the way, about how you guys can leverage the power of storytelling in building your own communities. Whether you're creating a social media post, a presentation for a community initiative, or a meetup, a website landing page for your organization, blog post, or an explainer video, you're going to learn to build narratives that help you build your influence so you can make a bigger, lasting impact that engages an even larger community. Okay, so we're going to do this talk in 3 parts. We're going to talk about why storytelling, why does that matter, how you can do it well, and then we'll have some Q&A at the end for your guys' questions. Sound good? Yeah. All right. So, why should you care? This is important. So, you should learn to tell stories if you will ever need to persuade another person to do something. Because the best way to do that is to tell a story. So a lot of folks think you could persuade people with a long, strong list of facts. But actually, it turns out that stories are 22 times more likely to be remembered than just facts alone. So there's actually like neuroscience that shows our brains aren't hardwired to understand logic or retain facts for very long. So there's actually a study, a professor asked the students to give a 1-minute pitch to their class. So think of like a business school class. Like most of us, so they're all pitching their ideas. Like most of us, most of those students pitching their ideas were relying on facts. And on average, they used 2.5 statistics per pitch. Only 1 in 10 of the students actually worked in a story. 10 minutes later, the researcher asked the students, okay, pull out a sheet of paper and write down everything that you remembered about the talks you just heard. Only 5% could cite a statistic. 63% remembered story. People are wired for stories. Maya Angelou puts it well, people forget what you say, but never how you made them feel. So think about how you make big decisions, right? So neuroscience has used fMRI studies to show that you actually get a natural high from hearing good stories. That's why so much of our culture is about seeking those out. Every time you like dial up Netflix or Hulu or watch a video on YouTube that a friend sent over, you do actually get a natural high that you can measure visibly in your body. But as we think about big decisions that you make, how do you make them? Like think moving into a new city, getting married, having kids. Are you making up long lists of pros and cons? Or are you thinking about how you feel? We don't make big decisions with just data. We make big decisions with our emotions. And so marketers have figured this out. So people at places like Nike and Airbnb and Apple have got this down almost to a science. These folks aren't making ads listing product features, like all the different little things that your little iPhone does. They're telling stories that tug at our emotions. But it's not just large organizations that are doing that. You guys, I think, many of you are already doing that. Many small organizations are building communities through storytelling. So I wanted to talk to you about one of them. It's kind of near and dear to me that's actually local here to SF. So I want to introduce you to Bart. So Bart actually lives here in San Francisco. So a few years ago, he left his job as a management consultant to do work to support communities in the developing world. Yeah, Bart's group. Oh, yeah. Bart's awesome. Another testimonial. So he went on to found a local nonprofit based right here in SF called Groundwork Opportunities, or GO. They're an amazing organization. They're basically like a Kickstarter for causes in developing countries. So they basically find local leaders who are working on great projects that are meaningful, that have traction, like building water wells to provide access to clean water, sustainable agricultural training programs to teach farmers how to create a sustainable income for themselves, clean sanitation systems to keep families happy. And then they connect these leaders with local champions here in the US and Europe, places like that, that can raise awareness about those leaders by telling stories to their own networks, right? So it's a fantastic organization, but at first they had a lot of challenges. They try to spread the word about campaigns on their web pages, and they list facts and figures about the economic impact of building these water wells in this village in Uganda, the number of people that it would impact, the benefit that comes from each dollar of donations, and it wasn't all that effective. But then Bart's always been a great storyteller, and he kind of thought about applying that to teach his champions how to tell better stories. So they actually created a toolkit, tips and advice for their volunteers of how do you tell your story well, both the structure of those stories and how to produce it well, record a simple video. And as they armed them with that know-how, what happened? So it turns out when their volunteers started making videos to tell their story, they were 8 times more likely to hit their fundraising goals. And since then, Go has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to support amazing causes that most importantly have helped improve the lives of hundreds of thousands of individual people. And they've grown their community exponentially, online and offline. So the short stories persuade. So anybody know who that is? That's right. Awesome. Everybody passes history. Do you remember what year the Civil Rights Act was passed? 64? Yeah. Pretty good, pretty good. Not as many people knew. That's okay, though. Random facts, like we've been talking about, aren't sticky, so it's not surprising. But you're not going to forget Rosa Parks' courageous story of standing up for people by taking a seat at the front of a bus. So we're surrounded, inundated by stories today. So let's look at some examples of some lighter stories that move us. Star Wars, Harry Potter. Star Wars is going to be huge this September. The Hunger Games. These are Lego movie. I'm a personal fan, of course, last year. These are awesome movies. But you kind of think about, like, okay, there's great storytelling in Hollywood. These are about, like, balancing the fate of the world in the hands of, like, one Lego figure or something. These are epic stories, and the stakes are incredibly high. And so while the communities that you're helping might be incredibly impactful and powerful, and maybe even world-changing in a way, you're generally not trying to get viewers to care about the fate of the world in the way that Hollywood shows. The thing is, your job seems a lot harder, right? Like, it's how do you get people excited about more prosaic things that are everyday? Your product or your company or your organization or your cause. So recently, I met with a big national nonprofit sponsored by the NFL that's working to build community support for bringing healthy eating habits and physical activity into schools to help keep kids healthy. So basically, they're trying to get millions of people crazy excited about eating vegetables. So how in the world do you build a community around that? But that's exactly what they've been doing through storytelling across hundreds of schools for thousands and thousands of people. I'm going to show you some examples, but the point is, no matter what your community is about, you can leverage storytelling to make it more engaging. So I'm going to pick a really hard topic. What if you wanted to build a community bringing together shy people? So I'm in this room of amazing online community managers who are super connected, and that's awesome. But, like, what if we were trying to reach out to introverts? What would we try to do? So I'm going to show you guys just the quick opening of her presentation, and see what you notice.
When I was 9 years old, I went off to summer camp for the first time, and my mother packed me a suitcase full of books, which to me seemed like a perfectly natural thing to do, because in my family, reading was the primary group activity. And this might sound antisocial to you, but for us, it was really just a different way of being social. You had the animal warmth of your family sitting right next to you, but you were also free to go roaming around the adventure land inside your own mind. And I had this idea that camp was going to be just like this, but better. I had a vision of 10 girls sitting in a cabin, cozily reading books in their matching nightgowns. Camp was more like a keg party without any alcohol. And on the very first day, our counselor gathered us all together, and she taught us a cheer that she said we would be doing every day for the rest of the summer to instill camp spirit. And it went like this. R-O-W-D-I-E, that's the way we spell rowdy, 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 let's get rowdy. Yeah. So I couldn't figure out for the life of me why we were supposed to be so rowdy, or why we had to spell this word incorrectly.
So spelling aside, it's pretty clear. Stories are a fantastic way to get people to pay attention to you, right? And that's why this TED Talk so many TED Talks are led off with these stories. So, because it's your best tool for persuading people. So, who here wants to move a lot of people to take some action? Any action? All right. That's great. These are your tools. So, let's talk about how you do it. How do you tell a great story? And let's go into the building blocks. All right. So, a great story, you need 4 things. You got to have an intent. What's your intent, right? What's the hook, a good structure, and a call to action. These are the elements of a good story. So let's start with the first. So an intent is what you're trying to accomplish as you tell your story. So let me give you an example of something that's not an intent, because sometimes people get this off. This is not an intent. I want millions of customers. So this is a result that might happen after you tell your story. So it's not going to help you actually tell the story, right? This is something that may or may not happen, like has nothing to do with what you're working on, which is like persuading people through your story. It's a nice notion. So here's an example of an intent. I want to excite people about feeling that they belong when they visit new places, right? And that's an intent, because it's a guide to how you'll want to tell your story. Because crucially, it reminds you of how you want your audience to feel and where you need to take their emotions, right? The first one, I want millions of customers, has nothing to do with your audience. This one reminds you very much about the feeling that you want to impart in telling your story. And of course, this is the intent behind all of the stories that Airbnb tells, and they've done a pretty good job of that. So define the clear intent for your story. But so here's a warning. So a lot of times people are going to go into a presentation, like you're at your organization, you're running a Monday meeting, and you have this deck that you prepared with an intent to tell or explain, the project, like the results, the event that just happened. But if your intent is to tell or explain, it's really easy to just slip into monotone or low energy. Because really, are you sure you just want to tell? Or do you want to excite them, motivate them, alarm them, challenge, shock, convince, inspire people, right? These words, like think about these intents instead of just telling or explaining. And a lot of good things will come, because another word for this is think about your passionate purpose. We call this intent your passionate purpose because it can guide you no matter how you're telling your story. If you're presenting in front of an audience or leading a team meeting, focusing on your passionate purpose is going to help you automatically align your voice, your body language, your energy, which all influence how your audience feels. Or say you're designing visuals for a social media campaign that you're running or a website. You can use your passionate purpose to shape your copy and design. It'll highlight more opportunities. If you're talking about something that's dark and scary and a problem in the world, thinking about fear, like darker colors and versus like hope and optimism and like levity and lightness, and like there's different design elements that come from that. So both in your language or your visual language as well as your content, use your passionate purpose to guide you. So for any story you tell, brainstorm your passionate purpose and let it be your compass. Okay, second thing your story needs is a hook. The hook is, you need to give your audience a reason to listen. So here's I'm going to show you guys some examples. Just one. So, Welsh corgis make up 85% of cute photos on the internet. True fact. They're adorable. There's a recent Corgi Con that happened 2 weeks ago on Ocean Beach where like 1,000 corgis were all in one place. It's a magical thing. So yeah, that's pretty convincing. I mean, so you could start with a shocking statistic, or just a joke, or dramatic pause, and that works too. Or it could be intrigue, right? So tell part of the story, leave the key parts behind, and people will follow you down that road. Another way is you might just want to start right in the middle of the action. You think about like a James Bond movie. Like nobody ever leaves the James Bond movie in those first 10 minutes. They're pretty exciting. So I'm going to show you another example of a hook and an exciting start. So this is actually a great example from one of my favorite books last year, this geeky science story about NASA. I will not be reading this aloud. So that's a pretty good hook. And in fact, it's good enough that it's the basis of The Martian. Matt Damon agrees. That's the first line of the book, The Martian, a self-published book written by a geeky engineer that became maybe one of the best movies of the year. But it starts with a hook, and that got millions of people to follow along and keep reading. So third thing is a story needs a good structure. And that's what helps you answer the question of, why should I care? So I know it can be hard to start something from scratch, like just blank piece of paper. So that's why structure is actually awesome. You don't have to start with a scary blank page. Instead, you're just filling in some pieces. So think about the hero, a compelling story as a hero, someone the audience can relate to. It's got to have stakes, something that she wants, but that she doesn't have yet. And then there's the journey, which is that roller coaster of ups and downs, an arc. The thing is, it's easier to relate to other people that do too. Likely so think about the best stories that you've heard, the ones that have really stuck with you in books or movies or other people. Likely every single one was about a struggle. And there's a reason for that. Show the challenge and then the struggle to overcome it, and you'll make people care. So there's so really simple 3-part structure to like pretty much any story. Do you guys have any guesses? 3 parts. Beginning, middle, end. Yes, you're so right. Master storyteller. It's true. We call them acts, but the first act, second act, third act, beginning, middle, end. So this is a super simple breakdown, but let's start with Act 1. What do you do in that first act? The thing that you do, put your character up in a tree, right? Show them in a tricky situation. That's not exactly where they want to be. Act 2, throw rocks at her. I would never, ever tell anybody to do that except in this context of storytelling. But show the challenges, right? Show the painful obstacles. Like, it gets worse. But then Act 3 always is you get them down. And that's the structure of a good story. Whether it's Star Wars or Harry Potter or what have you, it's always this pattern. And that's it. So what's an example of, I'm thinking of it. Does anybody want to think of an example of a famous book or movie that you guys like? That's stayed with you? The Princess Bride. Oh, yeah, that's great. The Princess Bride is actually my required freshman year reading in college, which is amazing. Princess Bride is about, so there's a guy, he barely talks, and he hangs out with this beautiful woman and is like basically her servant, and he doesn't say a word. Except he says, "as you wish," to her every request. That's right, 3 words. And they let's see. So and of course he's stuck in a tree. He loves this girl deeply, and he doesn't know how to get there because all he's saying is these things. He eventually proves himself happy. It's an awesome movie. Definitely check it out. Watch it. But at the end, like there's more obstacles. He finally starts speaking. He ends up being like an amazing action hero character and pirate, encounters more bad guys, but eventually gets down from that tree and they live happily ever after. So those are what makes them great? Those obstacles, right? So use a hero. Another example is the Hunger Games. In the Hunger Games, we get close to Katniss. We root for her. We feel everything she feels. Why? Because it gets personal. It relates to this idea that she sacrifices herself when her little sister's name is called to basically go to the Capitol and participate in this death match and likely dies. She sacrifices herself and volunteers herself up to be the person that goes and takes the role of her little sister to save her. And you care about her because we all care about this idea of self-sacrifice and love. So those details, you see those details of her growing up in the poorest district in all of the land, and those details make you care about her, because the more you reveal, the more people will relate and like what you have to say. So start some conflicts. This is probably the only time in in a group of community managers I would tell people go start some conflict and cause some problems, but that's actually exactly what you should be doing. So assuming you like the hero, how does it make you feel to see her under attack, right? Conflict means sympathetic interest. Think about somebody that you love. Now think about somebody throwing rocks at them. How does it make you feel inside? You're suddenly very engaged. And conflict makes us care and get us rooting for the hero. So all this leads to a core question that pops into viewers' heads and keeps them interested till the end. In different genres, there are different core questions. A rom-com, it's going to be, every rom-com has a core question of will they or will they not end up together? Every single one. Every action-adventure is, will she save the world in time? Crime story, will the detectives figure out who the killer is? Horror story, is the central character going to make it out alive? All of these things, all of these stories that are compelling and told in so many different forms have a central core question. So what's yours? Make sure it's there, but hold the answer till the very end. So often, like when companies are running campaigns or nonprofits are running campaigns or running community things, they say everything there is to know in that first tweet or everything there is to know on that first page. But hold the answer till the end, and that intrigue is going to get people to follow your journey. So after you've teased your viewers with the core question throughout the video or whatever you're working on, the big payoff is the spark. This is the revelation that resolves the conflict and answers the question. It's an epiphany, it's an advice, it's a lesson or technique that's allowed your hero to overcome the conflict. When this comes, your viewers are going to feel relief and delight. And so we'll come back to the spark. But one quick thing, a special note about our hero. So we've been talking about heroes a lot tonight, and that's the core of the story. But a lot of people are intimidated about telling their first story because they think they have to be the hero, right? And I have a lot of friends who think that's feels kind of unseemly. Like, I don't want to talk about myself. Like, it just seems like you're bragging about yourself as you talk about all the obstacles that you overcame and all the heroic things that you did. But don't worry, because it doesn't have to be about you. In fact, the real hero, it's usually the person you're helping. Your customer, your client, your audience, your constituents. Think of them as the hero of all the stories that you tell. You're not Luke, you're the little green guy in his backpack. So take your pick, whether you want to be Dumbledore or Cinderella's fairy godmother, Nick Fury, or good old Doc Brown. You're the mentor, right? And so if you're a business, the hero is going to be your customer. Your product website should center on her as the hero. It should show her problems, the obstacles that she faces. And it should illustrate what happens when you or your product's wisdom, your magic, can help her achieve her goals, right? That's the story of every great company, every great organization, every great cause. Make sure you tell that story. And the thing is, find the right hero. So, the last thing, there's got to be a call to action. A lot of times it happens that this is when you're going to turn all this persuasion that you've been building up through telling this story into action. You've worked so hard to carry your audience through this great story. So don't forget this last key step. And that happens all the time. So, now that your story's persuaded me, make it easy to figure out the one thing that I need to do. It might be sign up for an email list. It might be sign off on a proposal, join this Facebook group, donate, visit a website to learn more, or just share this story with your friends, with other people. But unless your audience is really deeply invested or already invested, don't paralyze them with too many choices. Sometimes you'll see a great story. This happens with a lot of nonprofits I think of, that they tell this great story, but then it ends in this overwhelming list of 6 different things you can do to help, or a website landing page that has 4 different calls to action that you can click on and try and figure out. If you're like most people, when you see that, you won't do any of them. So I mentioned it before, humans aren't wired to process and remember long lists of things. So keep it simple, keep it clear, pick one action, and you'll multiply the effectiveness of your story. Okay, so our story, kind of all of us today, we live in this world that overwhelms us with data and information all shouting at you for attention. But stories help you get heard and rise above the noise. Literally, when you tell a good story, people will slow down and listen to what you have to say. Storytellers win both attention and action. So if you combine the 4 building blocks we've talked about tonight, and you build your own story bank of stories, think about for your organization all the people that are involved, the people that you're helping, the people that work with you, the people that volunteer with you. All of you should start building your own bank of stories that you can draw from about the things that your community might care about. Just have a long, giant text file, and you can add to it. Then test them with other people, and then refine them. Make sure the best way to make stories better is to share them with other people, get their feedback, and iterate. And if you do that, you'll get people to listen, you'll move people to action, and you'll build great things. Cool. Thank you. Okay, so now we've got like some time, a little bit of time for Q&A, and if folks want to learn about voice and things, I can come back to that. But yeah, do folks have any questions? Oh yeah, I can, actually, yeah, I could show that real quick. Let me see. Oh yeah. Oh, awesome. Well, let me start. I'll actually show, like, one of the things is it's fun to see stories, and Rosette's made like a bunch of great stories, but actually one of the things that people react to is like, oh, okay, that looks cool, but like, how hard was that to make? So let's go ahead, I can show you guys, like, let's just make one, and I'll kind of show you guys what it does. All right, so gonna get in like storytelling mode or something. Let me just pull this down so I can reach the iPad. Okay, that's fine. Okay. That's not gonna work. Can people hear me okay? Or can people hear me? All right. Let me switch over AV-wise. Thanks. Okay, so this is, oops, I'm not sharing it. Let me move this over. This is a mountain. Okay. This is overshot. Okay. Okay, so this is Adobe Voice. So it's a free iPad app. We're actually building out a web version and an iPhone version. If anybody's interested in joining, like getting access to our private beta, just drop me a note and happy to get you on it. But, so it's free for everybody. Big thing is, how do we get started with stories? One of the things I mentioned before is that blank pages are really scary. And every time I open up PowerPoint or Keynote or iMovie, it's pretty intimidating. Like, what am I supposed to fill this with? And then the first thing I do when I start a PowerPoint deck is like, oh, well, it's blank. I guess I should spend my time thinking about what fonts to use and like what color background it should be. Like literally the least important things are the things I start with first. So in Voice, it's a bit different. Instead, we start with stories. So these are actually all inspiring stories like told by real folks in the community. Look, this is actually Muttville. It's local SF dog rescue. They're awesome. Yeah. You can scroll down and actually see stories in different contexts. So whether it's a nonprofit, small business, an exchange student introducing himself in French, a school district thanking people for community funding, you can get ideas for how to use stories in your own life, in your own work. Normally, you can just tap and just see one of these examples, but let's just go ahead and make one. So I've actually made like part of one. So I'll do the old Martha Stewart trick where I'll like do something and pull something straight out of the oven, but I'll show you how it starts. So let's see, where to go? So in this case, let me show you actually how I'd start from the beginning if I was starting from scratch. So let's say we're doing we're working for a community garden program. We're trying to get like parents excited about eating like local organic foods and getting access to these things for their families. So I just tap on create a new story. So instead of starting with like fonts and colors, the first thing it starts with is what's my story about? So kind of the intent question that we were talking about earlier, right? Which is the thing that matters most. If we don't have ideas, we can tap on inspiration and just see a wall of inspiration in terms of personal stories, stories you might talk about in a business context, like how to run a great meeting or company mission, stories in the context of causes, imagine a world without this, celebrating our successes. So one of the things that people kind of think about is like, oh, I don't have really many stories to talk about, but actually you probably have a lot. And so this is kind of a way to get that sparked. But in this case, we're talking about our community garden. We'll call it Garden to Go. And so, most people know what story it is they have to tell, but they haven't the faintest idea of how do you tell it well. And that's one of the things we've been talking about tonight, and I think you guys are super well armed now. But for folks who are just open up Voice, we actually have an entire library of story arcs. So these are different narrative structures that we've pulled looking through history and literature, the hero's journey, How do you share a growth moment? How do you teach a lesson? How do you invite people to a party and actually get them to come? All these are kind of built in as structures in the app. You know, if I wanted to talk about, let's say, promoting an idea, I guess pick this one. And instead of, it's hard to see on the big screen here, but down here, it actually is giving me an entire outline of a story. So the setting, describe the world today. Show who you're helping. What's the problem that the audience is struggling with today? What's the solution that we're proposing? And at the end, you know, how people can help. What's that call to action? So all those things that we were kind of talking about built in the app. But of course, it's not just a template. These are like, of course, Legos. They're building blocks. So we can rearrange and move them and create any storyboard we want to fit the story that we have to tell. So that's how you get started with something from scratch. So let me do the Martha Stewart version. Okay, so I've made a bunch of pages, but I'm going to make a few to show you how it really works. So basically, all you need to do in Voice is basically two things. I'm going to talk and pick some images and just repeat that. So I'm going to start talking to this iPad. If you've ever tried to do a voiceover recording for a video, you know it's incredibly painful because like you're trying to record something perfectly for 60 seconds, and then you cough at the 49th second. It's like, oh, you have to start all over, or you have to figure out how to use a waveform editor app and like rearrange sound waveforms. It's terrible. So in Voice, instead, it's just like a walkie-talkie. So there's this big orange button right there in the middle. It says hold to record. I'm going to push and hold on it like a walkie-talkie, and I'm going to say something. So let me try that out. Let's see. So, does your child know how an artichoke grows? All right, we're talking artichokes, and I hit play and see how it sounds. Does your child know how an artichoke grows? Sounds pretty good. So for a lot of folks, as we were testing out the app in the early days, people would come out like pressing that button, saying something, and they'd hear it played back, and they'd be like, whoa, I sound like I'm in an Apple commercial. That's cool. So Voice is actually automatically sweetening your voice. It's automatically normalizing it against adding music, normalizing against the music so it's not nicely balanced, and it basically makes you sound really good. The thing is, of course, you know, what if I make a mistake? Like I should have put more energy into that, or you know, somebody opened the door. Instead of having to start all over, I'm just going to press and hold on that walkie-talkie button again. So let me try that more with more energy. Does your child know how an artichoke grows? Does your child know how an artichoke grows? A little more energy, zest. So it's amazing. The big thing, you know, one of the things I mentioned before is like how important it is to iterate on your story, right? Like, and your high school English teacher probably said this too. Like, it's never your first draft that's the best draft. It's your fifth draft that's the best. But nobody ever writes a fifth draft. Gosh, that takes way too much work. But in Voice, like, it literally takes 2 seconds to do a second draft and a third draft and a fourth draft. So we've actually seen like 8-year-olds talking to their iPad saying the same line, once upon a time, like 8 times over and over again until they get it just right. And then you play it back all together, and that 8-year-old ends up sounding like Obama because they just had to be perfect 2 seconds at a time, right? And we can all do that. So of course, like our voice is pretty important in telling a story, but we're all very like ADD these days, and like we need to have visuals to show it. I can't draw to save my life. I work at Adobe, but I'm not a designer. So like, what do? Normally, I would open up my web browser and then do Google image search for something, spend like 20 minutes looking for the right size, the right color, the right resolution. Probably at the end of the day, I don't even have the legal rights to use it, so I probably shouldn't tell you I've ever done that. So in Voice, it's different. Instead, I'm just going to tap the plus button, and I'll tap on icon, and I'll just type it what I'm looking for. In this case, I think we're talking about vegetables. And Voice actually has a library of millions and millions of Creative Commons licensed images designed by professional designers and some professional photographers that are completely free for me to use. In this case, I think artichoke is more specific, so let me just get an artichoke in there. And pick an artichoke. Yeah. Which artichoke do you want? Just pick and choose. So that's my artichoke. All right, and that's it. So that's pretty much everything you need to know to create a voice video. Like, all I'm going to do now is I'm going to repeat that a few more times. So I'm just going to add another page, and I'm just going to record my voice and add an image. So let me do that a couple more times to show you how quick it actually is. How about a carrot? So I'll type in carrots, find some carrots, lots of carrots. Gosh. Oh, this carrot is nice. It's a good carrot. And then, I'll add another one. How about a tomato? And this one will be like a little subtly ironic because these kids don't know what tomatoes look like, so let me find some ketchup. And if I wanted to, I think I already did this one.
Most kids.
Oh, okay. Let me do this one. Most kids these days don't know where their food comes from. And I already did this one, but if I wanted to show photos as well, like the icons are great because they're all visually consistent and they're super crisp and clean and help people focus on what you're saying. But sometimes you really just want to show a photo to like immerse people in the idea. I didn't grow up on a family farm, so I'm in trouble, but not really. I'm just going to search for photos and find Pepperidge Farm cookies or tractors or cows. Oh, this is nice. It's a nice farm. Yeah, or a farm. So, and again, in seconds, so the time it takes to even just like open up a browser window and search for things is like so much longer than it is to actually put together something from scratch in Voice. So that's pretty much it. So you guys want to see what we got? All right, so I made a bunch of other slides along the same way. I'll hit play. Let me turn on the volume. Okay, and let's see what we got.
Does your child know how an artichoke grows?
Uh-oh. Oh, it's because my iPad is going through my computer, which is going through that.
Does your child know how an artichoke grows? How about a carrot? How about a tomato? Most kids these days don't know where their food comes from.
And most parents want their kids to eat organic, chemical-free produce. Well, now you can have both with Garden to Go. Garden to Go is a mobile flatbed truck that parks in your neighborhood for the entire week in front of your neighbor's house. It's a live garden with seasonal vegetables that you and your family can pick from yourself. We're a group of gardeners, nutritionists, and environmentalists dedicated to providing you with the best. Your kids deserve to know where their food comes from. So visit our website to learn more, and maybe even schedule a visit. We can't wait to come by your neighborhood and say hi.
From start to finish, you can have an entire complete explainer video ready to share wherever you'd like. So you see, of course, you can get it, just save a file and upload it to YouTube, share it on Facebook or Twitter, email, iMessage, wherever you'd like. Let me show you a couple more fun things. One is I messed up this line. Let me re-record it.
How about a carrot?
Or a carrot? No. I said how about twice for carrot and tomato. And then, so I fixed that. Okay, that's better. So another thing is, so of course, like, it's all kind of visually styled and looks beautiful. Voice, of course, has lots of ways for you to make your story really look unique and visually stand out. So here is a group of themes. Instead of having to manually pick and choose like RGB values and colors myself, Voice actually has a whole library of motion graphics themes. So these are more than just colors and fonts. Each of these has its own custom motion and animation. So if I wanted to see what this looks like wandering across like a map or something, let's see what this looks like.
Does your child know how an artichoke grows? Or a carrot? How about a tomato?
It's actually
most kids these days don't know where their food comes from.
So it's changed the animation completely to move across the surface in a map. So if you're doing a road trip story or journey, that could be a great way. And what would it look like in 3D with something like flipping out?
Does your child know how an artichoke grows? Or a carrot? How about a tomato? Most kids.
And so things are swinging in 3D. What would it look like if we took all of this and painted it in watercolors? One tap.
Does your child know how an artichoke grows? Or a carrot? How about a tomato? Most kids these days don't know where their food comes from.
So in literally one tap, you can have a video that looks completely different to really fit the mood and the feeling that you're trying to get across. Now, half the story is like how it looks. The other half, though, is how does it sound, right? And so we've kind of thought about that, too. It's actually, most people have tons of music, and of course you can add any music you'd like from your own iPad or your iPhone. But most people don't have music that works well with these types of explainer videos. Like me me talking with Taylor Swift playing in the background is like not going to make either of us sound very good. So instead, Voice actually has an entire library of music designed specifically to make you sound good. And they're in fact organized by emotion. So if I want something to sound happy, playful, relaxed, or exciting, it's just a tap, and I can experiment and iterate to find out like what feels right. Let me show you one quick example of how important this might be. Oops.
How does your child know how an artichoke grows? Or a carrot? How about a tomato? Most kids these days don't know where their food comes from.
And most parents want their kids to eat organic.
I'm going to stop the horror movie theme. But if you're talking about GMOs and really scary stuff, like that might be a nice way to do it. But yeah, again, it's this idea that like now you can start experimenting and playing with your stories in the same way as like I was playing with Legos. Snap one thing on, snap something else on, and see what works best to serve your story and your community. So that is Adobe Voice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. So I've got to show, of course I can add any photos I'd like straight from the iPad. I could take a picture. Hey, hi. We'll use that photo. Yeah, and we'll pull that in. So there's all, after it processes how amazing you guys look. Yeah, and there you guys are. So yeah, you could of course use any of your assets, transparent pings, SVGs, all the fancy like Adobe graphicsy formats. Just throw them in there, and it'll take care of it. Yeah. A story for creating stories. That's very meta. I don't think I have one here, but we should put that together. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So are we going to have an Android version? So Adobe's been in the process of kind of bringing our apps on all these different platforms. So a lot of times our team is relatively small, so we kind of really focused on making the iPad app first to make sure it was just a really good storytelling tool. We're bringing it out to more platforms. So I think eventually Android. The next immediate ones, iPhone will be next, and then web. So our thinking with bringing it to the web means that whether you have a Mac or a PC, any computer with a browser will be able to use Voice. So you can just use it there. Yeah. And that's right. So the iPhone and the web versions are in beta. Feel free to drop me a note at TomNG, and would be super excited to add you to our private beta. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. So question is, are we looking at it as both a tool for like creative storytelling as well as like marketing and kind of explainer videos? And yes, absolutely. So part of the genesis of Voice is like I'm a total podcast geek, and like I would listen to This American Life over and over like all the time. And so the reason why Voice is Voice, it's like the first it's an Adobe app named after not visuals and pictures, but about how we tell stories with their voice. It comes from that. So that's always been an inspiration. In fact, so I was showing you guys some of the photos of like classrooms using Voice. We've seen amazing like poetry slams with like 6th graders and 8th graders like done in Voice, and it's amazing. So yeah, great question. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So like question is like, so what stories was I telling to kind of rally the team to build Voice? So one of them is just personal. Like, so often, so when I was at Stanford, like at the design school there, it was a mix of all kinds of different disciplines. So you'd have like future lawyers and future business people and engineers and future MDs, kind of all trying to understand people and like tell their story, understand users, right? So we would follow and stalk people around and understand like how you eat ramen by like stalking people at the local ramen shop. And when we do that, of course, we'd have to relay that to other people, like as we were summarizing our projects. And people would try to be like really creative about it, because we realized that like actually like just some PowerPoint slides is maybe not the most engaging thing to see after you've seen like 10 other PowerPoint decks in a class. And so we'd make videos and things, but it was such a painful process. And you'd like, yeah. So on the last day of like all of our project days, I would just see my classmates all like red-eyed, bleary-eyed. Clearly nobody had slept because they'd spent all day like fighting iMovie or something. And it was just this notion that like people had to think so hard about production that they didn't get a chance to even pay attention to the content of the story that they had to tell. And it's like you either had to choose one or the other. It could either be like beautifully produced with no plot, or you'd have a great plot, but it'd be like told in some like really boring way. And so Voice is kind of, the goal of Voice is like, what if we could build a tool that let people focus not on production? You know, like basically most tools make you the set designer or the choreographer for the movie, right? Like you get to like put the chair here and put the curtains there and like tell people to jump at this time. But most people, I think, just want to be the director. Like, make it big! Like, this is the exciting part! And so that's what we're trying to do with Voice. And I think that's maybe resonated. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so, let's see, where should I start? So yes, so like just looking at the sort of all manner of online communities. So like even if you just go through kind of our Explore feed, you'll see like lots of nonprofit organizations kind of rallying, like you saw Muttville there earlier. We've seen lots of like communities in terms of like alumni associations and team sports. Like there's, I forget which team, there are a bunch of colleges that actually use Voice for their weekly like sports team update. And like, and so they'll just like talk about like, basically do like the weekly sports update like in Voice. In some riverkeepers.org is another one that's based in, I mentioned it was based in New York. They're creating all these videos that kind of actually from kids kind of using Voice. Another local one is the SF Bike Coalition. They're great. If you actually Google how to lock your bike, the top result is an Adobe Voice video that teaches you how to lock your bike so it doesn't get stolen in the city. And so when they tweeted that, like the official BART people tweeted that, and like local police across like cities all across the country were like retweeting and sharing this, because like videos are incredibly compelling. Like if you put a video on a web page, on average, it increases engagement by about 20%. Like people are 20% more likely to like buy or sign up or get involved. The video has historically been so hard to produce, right? So for a nonprofit, for a small community, it's like, oh, a video, like maybe we have budget to make one of those a year, and it's got to be good, and it takes like 8, 12 weeks to do, and that's it. And of course, you know, videos aren't evergreen. People watch them, and that's it. But what if you could create a video every week, right? That kind of changes the dynamic, and that's what we've seen in a lot of online communities that have used it. Another use case where for a lot of like Facebook type communities, now that Facebook has autoplay video, a lot of communities have been experimenting with creating videos so that and uploading them natively to Facebook. What they found is a lot of nonprofit videos tend to be like interviews. So it's like talking head of like important like director of the organization saying something. And when that autoplays in a Facebook feed, nobody cares. It's just like a talking head among like a sea of other heads in your Facebook feed, so you just scroll right past. There's a Bernardo's. It's a local. It's an Irish nonprofit that helps foster care kids. They started creating Adobe Voice videos, even without voices, because they knew they would autoplay. And so when you scroll down your Facebook feed and see like dynamic motion and animation, images and text are all kind of moving, like they got so much more engagement. Their typical posts would get about like maybe 20 likes, and when they post these voice videos, they get like 100, 150 likes and reshares of the same, because they stand out. And so that's a big part of what we're trying to help communities do. Yeah, cool. Any other questions? Oh, yeah. Yeah, so there's there's two ways to do it. So by default, so if I just hit Facebook, it'll automatically take care of like converting the video format into something that everybody could see. It'll actually host it on Adobe server, so anybody can see it, whether they're using an iPhone or an Android phone or a Mac or a PC. They're just guaranteed to see it if they open up the link. The other option that you also have is if you want to take the video and edit it in some other tool, like Premiere or Premiere Clip, or upload it to your own organization's YouTube account, you can just hit that camera button. Oops, sorry, I'm not sharing anymore. Anyway, there's a camera button, and you could just save to your camera roll, and it creates an MP4 video file that you can watch on any device. Yeah. Cool. All right, any other questions? Cool. Well, thank you so much, everybody. Yeah.